nose, out the mouth, all right? Please, if you have your cell phone with you, turn it off or silence it. Please do not be on it while someone is presenting. That means that you're not interested in what they're doing, which is not proper etiquette. Okay, so make sure that your phones are not seen. Second piece, when they have completed their presentations, there is a 5-minute question time period. If their presentations are shorter, then they have a longer time period for responding to questions. The panel gets to ask their questions first. Okay, so if the panel is done with their questions, then we'll go to the audience. All right. So if you feel like you're being ignored, please recognize that it's the panel's option first. Okay. Any questions? Awesome. All right. So our first one, brave soul, Noah Rayner, relocating extracurriculars.
Hello. Yes, my name is Noah Rayner, and I would like to talk to you. I'd like to talk to you about relocating extracurriculars. As you know, extracurriculars saturate the life of a high school student. They're involved in everywhere from scholarship applications to college essays, and they are in common everyday life. Extracurriculars are a main part of the high school student's life, and this continues on further after education and before when they are in elementary. If education is really a whole method of life itself and not just merely preparation for life, as said by John Dewey, then our schools need to emphasize education and its use in life. To coincide with the purpose of education, I believe in the separation of extracurriculars from academic institutions to benefit both community and achievement in the classroom. So to further my point, I have collected data from the Colorado website for financial transparency, as well as making my own surveys that I have distributed to the entire NCHS body. With these surveys, I had 50% of them returned, and I analyzed them for correlations between students' engagement in academic and extracurricular activities and their relations to the benefits and the harms that they perceived. Some flaws that could have happened with my data were because the honors program requires that students participate in extracurriculars, so you automatically have your higher achieving students who participate in these activities, as well as some surveys that were illegitimately filled out and that were not accurate. There are multiple types of extracurricular activities. Certain aspects in both academic and athletic activities. For example, you have curricular aspects of athletic, such as health and physical education, that go to in-classroom ideals. And then you have political theater and speech that are extracurriculars associated with drama and theatrical productions, but that are still included in curriculum. Then you have sort of separated aspects such as theatrical productions, plays, games, round robins that do not fit into the curriculum, and these are the aspects that I am arguing should be separated from academic institutions. And the reason I believe that they should be separated is because even though there are well-known benefits of including extracurricular activities, the harms outweigh the benefits, and there are viable solutions that students would still have access to by implementing them into the community. So while the known benefits in extracurriculars are life skills, you get inclusion, participation, it works to go against individualism, and you have increased use of physical activity, it's also perceived that students have higher grades because of eligibility. While I will disprove this later, it is still commonly believed to be a benefit of extracurriculars. CHASA believes that the main goal of a competitive athletic program is competition and pitting the most competitive players against each other. However, this is not a life skill or benefit of extracurricular activities and goes directly into the harms of extracurriculars. Harms in general include the costs of housing extracurricular activities. Students are more liable to prioritize extracurricular activities instead of academic success, and that goes into homework eligibility and academic integrity are all harmed by including extracurriculars into school. So the first and most obvious cost of hosting extracurriculars would be the actual fund distribution. In the fiscal year 2016 through 2017, we spent over $600,000 on activities and athletics. This was 13% of our budget. This may not seem like a giant percent, but it is more than the staff and student support combined. All of these funds that are represented here are from the Colorado website for financial transparency. And on the breakdown on the website, they say that these funds were given to the school by grants and were not used specifically for sports or activities and could have been used for anything in the learning environment. So these are not mandatory distributions to activities and athletics. This is where our school has chosen to give them. So in total, the learning environment had the majority of our academic funds going to the learning environment. However, this also includes the breakdown into activities, athletics, student support, and other. It is not directly into the learning environment. And this is all of the grants. You can tell where they are supposed to be distributed and to what percentages. The cost of housing extracurriculars is you can break it down into specific programs within the learning environment. Just for athletics and activities, you have this over $600,000, but the supplies alone that were 33% of this sum was 2.5 times greater than the supplies that we spent on our academic in-classroom instructional spending. The services, which was disproportional to the students who were in the entire student body, to the students who actually reaped services for this activities and athletics spending, was nearly identical for the services, even though it was disproportionate to the students who benefited. So for food services spending, it is well known that if students have a good breakfast and a good lunch, that they're able to participate better in school as well as become healthier mentally and physically. With the money that we spent on activities and athletics in 1 year, we could have provided the entire school with free lunch, free breakfast, as well as free breakfast for a majority of our elementary students. And in general, we spent exactly 5 times as much on activities and athletics than we did on food services as a whole, and 1.95% more, 4 times more for our supplies. So schools not only prioritize extracurriculars with funding, but also students are now more likely to prioritize extracurriculars. You have students who are involved in extracurriculars, almost 80% of them would miss school for an extracurricular event, whereas less than 40 who do not participate in extracurriculars would still put extracurricular over class time. This drops down to still above half when they knew their grades would not recover. So 50% of students who are involved in extracurriculars would still miss for an extracurricular event if they knew their grades would not recover from it. This was less than 15% for students who were not involved. So homework is also a big factor in time management and prioritization for students in schools. You have over 70% who felt like they had enough time to do their homework if they were involved in extracurriculars. However, this may have been because the majority of them had less than 1 hour of homework a night, with a very low bar of academic success that they are supposed to have outside of the school. That is most likely the reason that they were having such lower levels of homework, but it also could have been due to the fact that you have honor students who are required to participate in extracurriculars. So you have your higher achieving students who are mandatory that they be in that category. So eligibility is a pretty common argument for including schools and extracurriculars in the same institution. However, extracurricular activities just to attend a performance or an event, 76% of them would not complete their homework in order to be able to attend. This is direct prioritization of extracurriculars over academic success. And for eligibility, nearly 42% of our students just here at NCHS have or would cheat in order to maintain eligibility. This does not actually help improve the grades of a student and their knowledge in a classroom, but it does give the illusion that extracurriculars are beneficial to our academic success in schools. So eligibility is not the only reason that kids are sacrificing academic integrity. They will sacrifice it just to be able to attend an extracurricular event, even if they're not participating. And they are more likely to, in general, sacrifice academic integrity for any circumstance. Are you ready? So my solution to these harms would be to implement extracurriculars into the community. There are multiple benefits from including them into our community instead of having them founded in the schools, and it is a more than possible solution for the rural Cortez area. It's unnecessary that extracurriculars be in school to have the same benefits as a program would outside of school. For example, if you play volleyball in and out of school, you are doing the same activities and the same kind of teamwork and the only difference is the institution through which you are doing it. They have the same benefits as well as the same life skills. They teach the same aspects with improved responsibility. When students are not excused from class time, if they don't have excused absences from school, if they don't have leeway periods, the student then has the responsibility of making their own work on their own time before or during the time that they would have missed. So it actually helps increase life skills such as time management and responsibility that the student otherwise would not have to deal with. And it does negate the harms that was caused by the association with school. So the purpose of school is to create individuals that are compatible in a society of empathetic and caring individuals. If this is really the point of extracurriculars, then we need to have them be taught this in the community so that way they are able to participate in the community and a larger society outside of our academic institutions as a whole. So they are completely feasible for the Cortez area. With a multitude of extracurriculars already in existence currently, there is no shortage of activities that students would have access to gain these same benefits. Things like the recreation center and dance studios and clubs and field world. All of these are already known possibilities, as well as many more that could be included or implemented when we have more student participation. It is entirely possible that the students already want to have academic and extracurriculars separated. Almost 72% of students, 72% of students who participate in extracurriculars currently would rather and are willing to participate in community-based extracurriculars instead of having them associated. With an additional nearly 40% of students who do not currently participate in extracurriculars would still participate in community-based programs. So you actually have an increased number of students who would participate in programs, and you are not shortening the amount of benefits that our youth still receive. If the purpose of education, as said by Malcolm Forbes, is to replace an empty mind with an open one, then that should follow the goal of our schools. However, while we are opening the student's mind, we must not forget to educate them. Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, Noah, have you looked at how we in the United States do this in comparison to, say, other countries, particularly, say, Western European countries?
I have looked into this on my research. However, the data was not significant as there were not very many studies that took the aspects in Europe and compared them directly to America. I do have much anecdotal evidence on how much more successful their students were able to be inside of the classroom. However, there's not much research that went direct into analysis of specific schools, so I cannot include it into my program. But if I was to further this study, perhaps in college, I would definitely look into that.
So if you take this out of the school and move it into the communities, then you are in essence saying only the rich people, only the people who can afford the fees at the rec center, only the people who can afford those club fees should be able to participate in their extracurricular activities. So you're saying that we're going to go back to the way we were, that sports and competitions are the purview of the wealthy. Is that what you're saying?
It is not quite. I believe that we would not have to go to that extreme because there are multiple grants that are available to students, and with programs now that are encouraged by major league and like already established sports such as like Go Play and like 60 Minutes that are well-known programs for our youth. Those already exist, and we could find institutions that power in our extracurriculars, and we could apply for those grants and apply for those fundings, and the students would still have all those same benefits, and it would not be an elitist activity or sport because you still have outside funding. It just would not be coming from funds that could have been used for education.
So why aren't those funded by those now?
Because we have not applied for them.
Are you sure?
I am pretty sure, and
Did you survey that?
I did not survey that. However, when I looked in the Colorado website for financial transparency, all the grants it listed were not specific sports grants. And when conducting my research, I did see a multitude of grants, such as from CHASA and NOAA, that were for sports in specifics.
But CHASA is through the schools, so that would be strictly for school extracurriculars, not community extracurriculars, correct?
It's not exactly certain. It is most likely, okay, when I was doing my research, it said that they were giving them to youth programs. I believe that it was specific for schools, but currently, if we change this and they're no longer associated, there's no reason that CHASA could not be implemented in the community instead of within schools.
If we move that money to free and reduced lunch, did you look into how many of our students that qualify for free and reduced lunch participate in free and reduced lunch?
I did not look into that, but with the extra money that comes from providing lunch and breakfast, there is still a multitude of money that is left over that we could then use to increase the quality of our lunches, which would promote more people to use them.
I think that you have requirements as to what you can use for this.
Yes.
Any other? I still have more.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you think competition is important?
I believe that its effects are only important if people also learn teamwork and cooperation. If the only thing that you learn is competition, then things like individualism and that will prevail and students will lose all sense of community. So it is only important if you have a balance of other life skills that come with it.
One piece that I was a little confused about is you talked about one of the issues being time management, kids being involved in extracurricular activities don't have enough time to do their homework and things like that. How will moving the activities to the community change that? Because they're still going to be involved in those activities, they're just going to be in a different location and not have to worry about the eligibility activities, which means they could be failing and still be involved in their activities before they go to school.
I'm very glad you brought that up. So I believe that when we implement it into communities, that the students will learn more time management and responsibility because they do not have that excused time from class. And if they were to miss class time for those activities, the responsibility falls directly onto the students. So we are teaching them more life skills than their immediate decrease in grades.
What's the difference between an SAC excused absence and a family excused absence?
Could you please rephrase that question or define it SAC?
Well, SAC is excused for student activities. Family is excused by your parents. If you're on a local swim team and you have a competition and your parents call you out for a family reason, you've missed school, you're excused. So tell me how the difference between the community and the school sponsored is different.
That's a very good question, but I believe that when your family calls it out, that is again placing the responsibility onto the family as they are directly responsible for removing you from that class. And although you do get excused time from class that the student is not directly falling behind for, I believe it's still.
How are they not falling behind?
Well, if students have an excused absence, they are supposed to have the same amount of days as they were gone to make up the assignment. That would be really where we want to change that, where students, we could give them perhaps less of a leeway, but we still want to teach them to get their assignments done before or on time, even if they're going to miss class. So it would depend really on what kind of family they have and whether or not it's important enough to miss school. However, I would say that that would go back into why is attendance necessary.
Okay, our school policy does not allow you a day for every student activity. It's not counted as an absence. And so you are responsible for that work as you're gone. So how teachers deal with that is different. Our school policy does not give you an extra day, but it does for family. So with the community extracurriculars, you be excused for missing class where you're not for student activities, not by policy. So again, how does that moving it to the community mitigate that problem?
You could make it more stricter and when students are able to be called in and out of school. For example, if they are going to miss for extracurriculars, such as a sports game, as you said, then their family should not be able to call them in and they should have to make up that on time unless they have a doctor's note or an immediate death in family. Then our school policy does need to be more strict on restricting those students to what time is excused.
So the last two answers you said it falls on more responsibility on the student and family, which would seem to reiterate what you said before, that only the families that are strong enough to support their kids will be able to participate and take their kids out and give them the opportunities that they want. And therefore the kids who don't have that would not be able to see widening the gap.
I think it would have to do with, I'm sorry.
But yeah, it seems to widen the gap in our socioeconomic status depending on whether we have family support and money support to do it versus those ones.
I believe that perhaps there would have to be a transition period if we were to go straight into implementing them so we could mitigate those effects, such as only the wealthy being able to participate due to costs. However, if we were to fully transition into community-based extracurriculars, such as done in Western European states, then we could avoid having those conflicts because people could apply for grants. There's a multitude of funding already available through colleges and athletic programs that would provide for camps, as well as governmental grants. That could
But those grants barely support the youth programs, and now we're going to walk the high school programs on top of those grants. Is that the system?
I believe that there's a multitude of money. If we're willing to spend $600,000 on just activities and athletics, then we should be willing to find those resources from somewhere else that could not have gone to schools. Yes, Mason or Tracy?
I would have long-term concerns on how this might end up with what we would call de facto segregation, where without government policies or rules segregating people, we create the opportunity for it to happen naturally. The saying birds of a feather flock together holds pretty true. In public education, this is a school where people from every level of our community's children are put into one building and they interact and they come up with some pretty unique new ideas. Where outside of this public education arena do young people from across the social and economic spectrum have an opportunity to get together and sometimes come up with their own ideas for a new activity? Like JASA is apparently now going to recognize gaming as, I don't know if you want to call it a sport, but they're going to recognize it. I don't think that idea came from a community entity or even an adult for that matter. That's a bunch of students coming up with that in a learning environment. Isn't school the logical place for young people to engage in extracurricular activities, or do we want to push that outside?
I think that it would have a larger impact and that we would actually have more things like that that are expanded opportunities for our students if it was separated, because then you have a larger time interval that when they are considered youth, they would be allowed to participate. Right now, when they graduate high school, you're no longer allowed to participate in school-associated extracurriculars. While if they were community-based, the same program would have an extended time interval to have those new benefits and those new opportunities for students that are not kicked out or removed from them.
So in Western Europe, where there is a system very similar to the one that you're describing here, health and PE are not required to graduate. Why do you think that America has health and PE to graduate?
I think it's to compensate for our obesity.
So how does that play then into the overall project?
I would say that those are academic aspects of our extracurriculars that would not be dissociated from school. We would still have health and PE classrooms and classes in our school facilities. We just would not, we would be teaching things about proper nutrition, exercise, like actual like body mechanics, and we would decrease our emphasis on sports and more like less academic and things that help them fight obesity. We would just shift our focus.
Less time moving does not help to fight obesity. So studying about the mechanics of the body does not help you to be less obese. But being in a sport will.
Well, not all students here participate in sports and extracurriculars, as well as many people who find ways to get out of health and physical activity, such as health online. So really, if we were to address those problems, then we would have to actually find ways to implement stricter health and physical activity programs.
So if you were to survey the students, and I won't even get into your statistical significance of your survey, just to give you a break, but if you were to survey students and ask them if they could miss school for any reason whatsoever, would they? What do you think your answer would be compared to your one for if they could miss for an extracurricular?
I did actually ask that question. I asked if students would miss for any event. I did not specify any event, but I did not ask what it would be. I just asked in general. I can go back to that graph if you would like.
So senior skip day. Do people participate in that?
Seniors do.
So do they care if they miss or not? Do they care if they are totally unexcused for that? Do they care?
They do not.
There you go.
Yes.
This has been focused mostly on the sports, but what you're suggesting cutting would also affect the arts. And again, I think that gap of the wealthy versus the non-wealthy would also really begin with dance, because dance is super expensive, and so how are the schools gonna compensate for that if the arts are already cut so significantly? And if you take that out, it's gonna, and it's proven that arts help in all other aspects of your education, so.
So I'm actually not arguing for the separation of all arts or for all theatrical productions for that matter. I'm arguing only for the aspects such as like productions and plays or like art shows that don't exactly fit into the categories of curriculum. Well, however, we would still have art programs and theatrical programs. We'd still go into speech or political theater or like use of like political art. We would still have those programs. If we currently did, we would still have those programs. We just would not excuse them for like miss time to go to like travel to Denver or anything like that. They would still be like minimized. But
That's kind of like always practicing and never getting to play. I mean, you take those classes and then you never get the reward of the art show or the play or the band going out and performing.
Like to speak to that as a theater teacher.
Just guys, we are at our time limit, at 25, and maybe you can chat with her during lunch.
Sure.
So I'm gonna just kind of have to stop this here. All right, so first. Okay, guys, let's get started on our next one. Our next one is David Hoffman, Music for Those at Risk.
Hi, my name is David Hoffman, and I'm going to present about music education and its benefits for students who are what we call at-risk students. So first of all, how many of you in here have been involved in a class in high school pertaining to music in some way? Wow, that was a lot more people than I was expecting. Okay. First, let me define what an at-risk student means. There have been many definitions. Some may say that students do not have a specific reading level that is up to grade. Some may say that it's the underprivileged minorities in our community. But I would argue that an at-risk student should mean a student who has a factor that could damage their academic performance, such as being an underprivileged minority or having a low reading level. So there are many benefits to music education, specifically for these students. There is some research done at this project called the Harmony Project in Los Angeles, where at-risk students from the area are taken in and taught music. And a lady named Nina Kraus went and studied these kids for 2 years and discovered that their music education improved their language skills. Because of their music instruction, they were able to distinguish between two very similar syllables, specifically ba and ga. So there are very subtle differences, and because of their musical instruction, they were able to distinguish between the two, which is a vital part of being able to process language. It is also shown that music education improves academic performance. There are positive correlations between music and IQ. Music instruction improves IQ, which is a good measure of how a student will perform academically. It also has been shown to improve test scores. There were students compared to students that were not in music and students that were, and found that the test scores were comparatively higher in music than they were in students that were not. There are some potential drawbacks to music education, though. The process is not a quick fix. Nina Kraus discovered that while any amount of musical education does improve the language skills, students needed at least 2 years of musical instruction for the results to become more apparent or more noticeable in the students. It is also very hard to make appealing to everyone. So Stephen J. Morrison did a study for the Music Educators Journal on 13,000 students from across the nation, and found that only 22% of students in the nation are involved in music in some way, whether that be through a class at school or a choir outside of school, and found that within that 22% of students, the majorities were very female oriented. There were 63 or 77% more of females involved in music compared to males. And it is also very highly Caucasian or white. So for a community, and so I propose that we set up some sort of like mentorship program, not unlike programs we had here at MCHS, where students can volunteer their time to go to elementary schools or wherever across the community and kind of educate the students about music. And this way it involves every kind of student in the community. It encourages those students to see that music can be not just beyond their classroom, but something that can be always a part of their life. And so. Do you have any questions?
On the studies that they did as far as proving that music education improves IQ scores, how do they prove causation there? Because I think in the past, one of the arguments to that is most of the students that are involved in music programs also have very involved parents who are likely to have read to their children when they were young. So how do you separate that out from your test group?
Well, the researcher compared students that were in music and took their IQ scores and then compared them to students that were not involved in music in any way, and found that there were positive correlations between students involved in music and that had higher IQ scores than, say, students that were not.
But did they separate out any variables as far as your test group? But because I think that most people feel that are involved in sports feel the same thing, that you've got an involvement in these kids and adults that care about them on an individual basis. And so then they perform better. And so how do you separate that out?
The research did not specifically say, it just said it compared students that were in music to students that were not, and didn't get too far
They
into
have the same demographics.
it. Was very split demographically even,
Okay.
according to the research, so.
When you mentioned when music is used in education, it's not a quick fix and you need at least 2 years to see results. That suggests these studies have been done quite a bit. Do these studies show there's an ideal or good age group of student where you want to really be giving them music more than other times? Is there like a perfect time to start doing this?
The research I found did not specify an age group that would be specific, the specific perfect time to instruct in music. All the studies I found range from ages 6 to up to high school age.
Can I piggyback off of that question in regard to the type of music education they're receiving? Are they singing? Are they playing instruments? Are they learning music theory? Are they listening to music? What constitutes music education?
So the music education that they were specifically involved in included singing and learning an instrument. music theory, it didn't necessarily apply to just listening to music. So none of the studies I found stated that only listening to music would have those benefits.
So, I mean, I don't understand the difference between, I know in elementary school they have 6 years of music class. How is that different than what they're proposing now?
So my proposal is that it gives students, like elementary students, someone that they can look up to, more like a mentor, instead of just being involved in a class. And this mentor would be kind of show them that they can be still involved in music if they so choose after music class. It doesn't have to be just in that one classroom.
Okay, and so then if you do music for all, are you gonna run out of mentors and flood the system because now you're providing it for everybody as opposed to targeted groups where you can find a talented person to take a small group and run a study. Now you're flooding it with everybody and now your results are severely diminished because you're taking second, third, fourth best mentors just to have somebody.
That is a good question, and I would say to that, it would probably be more of a small group type thing that would allow students to also be involved with other students, not just the one mentor. And that would also solve the problem of having a mentor that may not be as well versed.
How would you fund this? I mean, the mentors is a great way to cut the costs, but an instrument, if you're doing but if you're, you need the music, you need the books, how would you fund all that?
That is a good question, and I honestly do not know the answer.
I don't know.
Back on your study, how do you know that it's not the people with the higher IQ that are interested in music? Maybe, because honestly, people don't work very hard to fail by less. And so if I'm not very good at music, if I'm not smart enough, maybe that's why I'm not in music. And would that skew your data?
That would probably skew my data a little bit.
I got one question. You talked about mentor programs that already exist in CHS. What are those?
Youth Leadership Council does something where they go out and have students from the high school kind of go out to the community and.
Did you look into how that works in reference to like how it can be slotted into the music program?
I did not.
Is this to occur during the school day?
It could occur during the school day or or outside of the school day, depending on where the schools would feel they would like that time to be used.
So if it's during the school day, are you proposing that we cut something else? And if so, what are you proposing to cut?
I don't propose that we cut anything. It might, maybe the music teachers decides one day, maybe it's just a day, a month, or a week, or something along those lines. Just a regular time, maybe during their classroom time, have the students come in and kind of just teach the students.
Do you think like theater programs like narrative ninjas and stuff like that would also be included in helping? Like
Maybe, because I know there's musicals that often at times involve music and but that's a good question.
I know, as I've heard, like for practically every single elementary school, they always start before the high schoolers do. So in order for us to actually take mentors to the elementary schools, we would either have to take them right before school, so then we would have to wake up earlier than we normally do. So what's your proposition on that?
That is a good question. I would probably say It's I would more so say it's the high schooler's choice if they would want to be involved in a program like this. Cause it's the high schooler sacrificing some of their time to go out and teach these students music. So it would depend very much on the high school student and when they are willing to give up their time.
So real quick, is your point to provide a mentorship program to get students who aren't interested in music, or to offer a mentorship program to students who are already interested?
That's a great question. I am more intending it for students that are not very interested in music to be more involved in music.
So the second part of that is the structure of the band program here, which you're aware of, does offer kind of a mentorship program where the student leaders are chosen from higher grades to help younger incoming freshmen and sophomores learn more about programming music. Do you think that's sufficient, or do you think it should be improved on?
Well, to that I would say that is more of a mentorship in where music students are mentoring other students that are already involved in music. Whereas the program I suggest would try to include more people in that music program.
How do you intend to engage the students that typically don't engage themselves in situations with people they don't tend to know?
That is a good question. So the reason I kind of lean more towards a mentorship program is that so that students can kind of see that there are people that are willing to be there for them and kind of show them something that they enjoy or get something out of. And so.
I think this is a really great idea. You guys remember in middle school, you guys had chess club and all those things? Do they still offer that? Couldn't that just be like extended to include music? I think there's already a place for it.
That is a good question. There are programs for music in our community, and I think that involving this mentorship would be another incentive for students, especially since they will have someone that they can kind of look up to, especially since they dedicated their time to come and spend it with those students.
So when you started this presentation, you started talking about at-risk students. So would you try to focus more on those students when you started this program? And if you did, would that help the fact that you might overflow the program if there's too many kids?
That's probably where I'd start, especially since it's been shown that there are benefits for those kinds of students to be involved in music. And then if it goes successfully, we can expand out to other students that not necessarily don't have those factors that could damage their academic performance.
Have you looked at phenomena in communities like the Harlem Renaissance that can compare sort of to this project, where you're trying to integrate arts and music into at-risk societies and the effect of that?
I did not.
I know, it's a really interesting.
I didn't think of that, but that probably would have been a good angle to explore.
Any other questions?
So obviously this is something you're very passionate about, which I think is great. So how do you think that things that you've learned in your music classes and being involved in music will affect you in long term outside of just academic curriculum?
That is a good question. So I have found in my music classes, I found more of a sense of community that I've never felt anywhere else. Music has allowed me to make other friends I normally would never make. Allow me to experience some opportunities that I would never have thought possible. And so
If they were to take the education, the music education out of the schools and out of the extracurriculars, as our previous presenter asked, do you think that very many people would participate outside the school?
I don't think so, no. Mainly because it is so hard to make appealing to everyone, like, as the study showed, not very many people are involved in music, and the kids that are very skewed towards white females, so.
Okay, so if this program is a thing that you volunteer for, how are you getting the students to be engaged if they're not interested in music?
That is a good question, and I would say to that, the mentorship would be kind of a way to engage those students, because the students have someone that has volunteered their time to come and spend it with them and show them music. So I think that already kind of might negate that issue.
Do you think that, like, with this mentorship, you would also try and get the teachers involved in the program to help get their students involved with the others?
That would probably be a good idea. Any other questions?
Okay.
It's been a while.
We have one more time for questions.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Oh my
Are you sure that?
That's what I was thinking, that's the conversation.
You did a good job. That was fun. I thought it was great. Are you gonna have a camera right there that's on digital? And then they have it live. Okay. Sorry.
I'll be like, I'm just gonna be really bad. How are you? You can watch it live We don't have a first hour. Oh, yeah, no, let's just say I'm not inclined to play it over here. Get out of my chair. Yeah. I like this support system that we got. Oh gosh, yeah. Like if I had to go last or anything, I would have
You might not want to see this. I said you didn't want to see it.
I can watch it again. Yeah, these are like they are really it's all I'm not ready. These are always environment actually It's nice baby, but that's still as well. And it's just really good. That's probably it. Okay, so this is Blake's donut, banana nut, berry, and cinnamon. I think it really. How are we on water?
I also, I figured some people might have, but I was like, that might not be weird. Especially when
I'm not telling. That's all right, I'll give you.
But I got this one.
Every class you see all the
Maybe or how and a very common
And she's I believe she's like
well, you can always ask, and I'll help you. She goes,
Okay, guys, we're gonna get started again. If I can remind you, we've got some new people in here. If I can just remind you of the guidelines. Make sure that if you have a cell phone, it is silenced and it does not come out during the presentation. Okay. Second piece of information: if you have questions, the panel gets to ask their questions at the end before you do. So just refrain from raising your hand until the questions are asked by the panel, okay?
So I also might remind everybody that we're live streaming, so everybody's on and can be heard.
Absolutely. We are also live streaming this event, so please be aware of your P's and Q's. Very good. All right. Yes, sir.
Was that okay last time when there was like silence and then we started asking questions, or are you gonna?
That was great. Okay. That was great. Yeah, that was good. Okay. Okay. Our next one is Marguerite Copeland, opioid crisis and vet med. Yes, I will do that.
All right, my name is Maggie Copeland, and my project is on the opioid crisis and how it is impacting vet med. So one of our country's most pressing issues for decades has been the opioid crisis. However, we're not always seeing all sides of this and how it is impacting all of our society. It was brought to my attention in an internship which I did with a local vet that it is also impacting veterinary medicine. Here I have a quote by a U.S. Surgeon General which states that since 1999, opioid overdose deaths have quadrupled and opioid prescriptions have increased markedly, almost enough for every adult in America to have a bottle of pills. So basically my hope in doing this project was to learn how the opioid crisis can be regulated within vet med in a way which does not cause harm to either veterinarian practices or those who are trying to fight the crisis. First, I wanted to start off with a little bit of history concerning the opioid crisis. It has been a problem since the late 1990s when pharmaceutical companies released a false statement which claimed that opioids were a non-addictive form of drugs which were also very effective. However, as we all know, this is not true. And abuse rates started to skyrocket as this false claim became recognized. So here I have some numbers concerning the opioid epidemic, and these were all gained in 2017, I believe. Some important ones to my project were that 130 plus people died every day from opioid-related drug overdoses. 11.4 million people misused prescription opioids. 47,600 people died from overdosing on opioids, and 2.1 million people had an opioid use disorder, as well as down here, 28,466 deaths were attributed to overdosing on synthetic opioids rather than methadone. So in response to this, the United States Drug Enforcement Administration has implemented programs in order to combat this epidemic. The first thing is education of medical professionals. So we see this a lot in conferences, which they have instated. So this would be getting a bunch of medical professionals together, having them talk about this epidemic, and also the DEA coming up and informing them on how to help better this epidemic. Also, they have been monitoring medical disposal and tracking transportation. So basically just making sure that we are all informed and know where the drugs are from the pharmacy to the doctors to the patients. However, vets have not really been as involved in this as I believe that they should be. And because of this, they are experiencing a lack of role clarity. They're questioning which actions they should be taking, and they're questioning how educated they should be on this matter. So, my solutions for this, I really wanted to see how the crisis could be regulated within vet med without causing harm or opposition towards those who are fighting it. I came up with 3 things. First, I came up with education. This can be seen in DEA conferences, which should always include vets, and also in veterinary schools. I believe that if we improved curriculum to include the topic of opioid abuse, it would greatly help. Second, I came up with abuse and compassion training. It is very common in the medical field for one to have mental health issues, and these mental health issues can often lead to drug abuse. Third, I looked at reporting laws. This does include animal abuse, as well as a program called the Prescription Drug Monitoring Program, which was enforced by the Department of Regulatory Agencies and is specific to each state. So for curriculum, I found a survey from Colorado vets, and I found that 88% of these vets claimed they were unfamiliar with warning signs of abuse, and 63% had had no previous training concerning opioid abuse at all. So I looked into the curriculum of 3 fairly well-known vet schools: Colorado State University, Texas A&M, and University of California, Davis. I printed out the curriculum, I looked through all the classes, I looked through what they learned in each of these classes, and I found that none of these classes had a focus on specific to opioids and the abuse of these opioids. However, I did find a pharmacology class. Pharmacology is where you learn the basic uses and effects of a variety of medical drugs. And I thought that it would be a good idea to include just simply 1 unit into this class, which would help increase education and background of these vets, as well as help them understand their role in this fight. Next, I looked into animal abuse reporting laws. I found that addicts will harm their pets in order to be prescribed drugs. They will obtain these drugs illegally, and they will either use them themselves or they will sell them and use them for distribution. However, when I looked into the reporting laws concerning abuse in each state, I found that only 19 US states have non-mandatory reporting laws, meaning that the laws are instated, but there are no consequences if you do not enforce these laws. And then 12 states have no laws at all regarding reporting. Here we have each law by state. The blue states are laws regarding reporting, which are non-mandatory. The green have mandatory reporting, and the purple have no laws at all regarding reporting. It is my belief that if we are to strengthen these laws, we will hopefully decrease the amount of people harming their pets in order to obtain opioids. Next, I looked into the Prescription Drug Monitoring Program. This is a visual which I pulled off of their website, and it basically just kind of states what they do with these databases. Basically, the pharmacies will upload information about each prescription which they have, and then the users, which includes vets, it includes doctors, pretty much anybody within the medical field, will be able to access this database and then be able to make informed decisions concerning who gets these drugs, who they're prescribing them to, how much they should be giving them, and just collectively kind of an area to put your information concerning the drug. However, this usage is not required in many states, and therefore it is not used regularly, which I think is a great disservice, and it would be a good idea to implement it. Next, I looked into compassion cultivation training. This was coined by Stanford University School of Medicine with the intent of decreasing compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue is defined as the gradual lessening of compassion towards those who are suffering due to frequency of providing help. It is something that is very common within those within the medical field. So you have, again, your vets, your doctors, your nurses. You can also see it in teaching, There's anyways, depending on who you're providing help with. So you have, this training provides a series of mindfulness practices, including meditation, visualization, therapy, with the ultimate goal of retaining one's lost compassion or increasing overall mental health. By addressing anxiety, stress, depression, and overall just compassion fatigue, we will hopefully be able to help reduce addiction problems within the medical field. A use of this compassion training was seen by a woman named Olga Klemecki. She is a psychologist and also a neuroscientist. And in 2012, she performed a study to view the brain function seen while going through this compassion training. And she had the goal of decreasing occupational burnout. So what she did was show a group of participants anxiety-causing videos, which were shown in order to activate the anterior insula and anterior medial cingulate, which are the areas of the brain which are associated with distress and pain. After showing these videos and then giving the training, this activity was shown as positive rather than negative as it was when the videos were shown. And then also it heightened the activity seen within parts of the brain associated with happiness and positivity. So as a result, this study shows that vets and other medical professionals would highly benefit. They would have other methods than simply prescribing these opioids and dealing with patients. And by integrating this training into our communities and making it readily available, we could hopefully decrease mental health issues in all medical professions, not just in the vet world. So in advancing the vet roles, they obviously play an important role in the eradication of the opioid crisis, as it is vital to their practices. However, they have been pushed to the bottom of receiving lists, causing many of their drugs to be back-ordered, and leading to a lack of important painkillers and anesthetics, including hydromorphine, morphine, fentanyl, hydrocodone, and oxymorphone. Because of this, I've also found these numbers from the survey of Colorado vets. 83% found that they were mixing non-narcotic drugs to have the same effect as opioid drugs, and 71% saw increased patient suffering, while 26% were forced to postpone a surgery. So in conclusion, vets should have access to education, should be educated on how to lower abuse rates, and also have a way to help themselves, their staff, as well as their patients concerning abuse. So I kind of wanted to bring it home and make it more local, and I thought that two things that could be implemented into our community would be the prescription drug monitoring program databases, as well as compassion training. With the PDMP, I think it would be beneficial to educate local vets on accessibility and usage, as well as implementing compassion training by offering annual classes for all medical professions locally. And
So people are just bringing in a horse and saying you can't walk and getting pills and then you're taking them?
Yes.
Okay. Wait a second, so what percentage of addictions are coming from vets? Because the ones I've seen, like the highest prescription drug and opioid abuse among teenagers is coming off of surgeries, wisdom teeth, shoulders, and knees.
Mm-hmm.
So what percentage are vets playing into it? And why did you choose it versus other areas where they're more accessible? It seemed to be, because you also said in there that vets are pushed to the bottom of the list, so that means everybody else has more access to those medicines. Then, so it seems like something else should be more of a priority than the vets.
Than the vets? I'm sorry.
So
I don't
what percentage of addictions are coming from vets, and why is that a priority? Because your last slide said that they were pushed to the bottom of the list.
Oh, the opioids are coming from vets?
Yeah.
Okay, so something that I did also see that was an issue. So vets keep their drugs inside of their clinics, and so break-ins have also been an issue there if one knows that. And so I guess people just kind of view a clinic as an easier place to be getting the drugs. The DEA has been restricting the drug usage Like, so they have only, the reason that their stuff is getting back ordered is because a lot of it will be going to general hospitals, which does make sense. However, as stated, it is increasing animal suffering because they're postponing surgeries and they're using not as safe methods to decrease the pain of their patients.
Okay, so what percentage of addictions are coming from vets? Because your first slide was about the opioid addiction, so what
I
percentage is?
do not have a percentage on that. However, I would like to look more into this.
So,
Right, I'm sorry.
the prescription drug monitoring, are you saying that the DEA needs to create one for veterinaries? Because there's already one out there for the physicians.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm just saying, I think it needs to be a little bit more inclusive as well as more required to use it, because I don't feel like people are using it to its highest potential.
One of the obvious problems for people is that we don't think we should be subject to any pain when we're recovering from surgery, and so we basically pressure our physicians to give us opioids. Could the same thing be true for pets, when I take my dog to the veterinarian? And is there any evidence that, say, veterinary doctors are overly prescribing opioids where, say, something lesser might work just as well?
I think that's kind of a hard thing to say for sure. I don't know, as a human, you can say, oh, this really hurts, like this hurts on a scale of 1 to 10, this is how much it hurts. Whereas with animals, you can't really do that as well. So I think that's kind of a hard thing to answer indefinitely with things like that.
I guess the sort of part of the reason for the question is obviously the opioids that are given for our pet are sometimes ones that we're using instead of the pet.
Yes, yeah. And so that is actually a really good idea. And I think that something that would be definitely helpful is advancing non-narcotic drugs so that they would be giving more of a higher effect while not being as addictive and not being as abusive.
Okay, so I'm a little confused as to, when you talk about the drug abuse, clearly it's not the animals that are abusing the drugs. And so, so then I was a little confused, is it the owners, is the risk the owners, or is it the risk of the vets abusing the drugs? And if it's the owners, is it the vet's job to be recognizing drug abuse and having programs so that they can relieve that anxiety in the owner?
Okay.
I mean, that's a human doctor's job, and so in that kind of spreading out what their job is.
I think, yes, I did do it with both. I split it up so that I did do it within the owners abusing the drugs, and then also seeing it within those who are in the medical field. I didn't want to go so far, like you said, to say that they should be having anxiety concerning the owners, but I do believe that with the reporting laws, if that they do see something that seems kind of like a little suspicious, a little unsure about what actually happened with the animal, they should report that so that maybe that person can get help, or the police could be involved with the animal abuse.
So is there a reporting mechanism for animal abuse for the vets, or is that kind of just on a, like a required reporter? Is that what we're calling it? Mandatory reporter. I mean, that didn't sound right.
I actually did look into that, and that was one of the role clarity questions that they were kind of having. A lot of them, I read an article from the Denver Post, and one that was interviewed, and he kind of stated that he agreed with the reporting law should be strengthened, but he himself was unsure exactly how to handle that. So that is another issue which I feel needs to be addressed.
So yeah, I have to say, if you've got opioids going, 3 million pills of opioids going to one vet in Cortez.
Yeah.
Kind of like that little place in West Virginia that they had like a tiny town of like 5,000 people that over 3 years had like
Everyone has a bottle
55
of
million pills distributed. I do think the reporting laws. When you're talking about the compassion training, does that help pain or is that just simply mental health issues? And is that mental health for the vets and their staff? Is that what the compassion training is for? Or is that for them to be more compassionate toward? Because honestly, hypochondriacs get no sympathy. I get that, but
When I was researching this, it was more of, it's a mental health, it's definitely more mental health. And I was linking it to mental health leading to addiction problems as an unhealthy coping mechanism. But I definitely think that if we were to implement it into our community, we should put it out there as not just for people who are vets or people who are doctors. It should be something that anybody would be welcome to come to.
So the compassion, if that puts more, you have more compassionate vets, and then what Dr. Schumacher said, now they're more willing because of the pressure to just hand out more pills. Isn't that working opposite of what we're trying to do?
I think that it would probably be less of I think it would work in the opposite of what you're saying because if you would feel less inclined to simply prescribe an opioid drug.
But I'm more compassionate, and they're feeling more. When I'm a hardened, like, I see this every day, no, go, versus, oh yeah, I've had sensitivity training, you're in pain, here's the prescription.
Okay, I see what you're saying. No.
I don't get how that works.
Okay. I guess from what the research that I found, I saw that it would make you more, occupational burnout would lead you to want to make it easier on yourself. And so by just simply writing a prescription, that would be for you an easier thing to do.
So we've identified veterinarians as being more or less unwitting suppliers to this giant epidemic of addiction that's spread across the country. You're advocating for some oversight on them, some controls, and you mentioned the Holy Grail, you want regulation without opposition. I got a two-part question here. One, in your research, did you come across any data that shows how many veterinarians themselves became victims to this and are personally addicted to the drugs they can prescribe?
I did not have percentages on this.
Okay. A follow-up for that, you've mentioned the PDMP, the Prescription Drug Monitoring Program, and you're advocating for more training and responsibility at the level of the vets. I'm going to call for a little cynical speculation here, maybe. What about some more oversight and control of the gosh darn companies that make these molecules?
Yes.
I don't think they accidentally just dumped it on the market the way it happened.
Definitely not.
More research is sort of showing that. Do you think the vets themselves are deliberately targeted as a knowing supply?
I guess to answer your, shouldn't we be looking more at the pharmaceutical companies, I'll start there. I think that with the PDMP in all areas, we should have, definitely starting with the pharmacies should be putting all the information, they should be required to put all that information in there. And then also, I think that the vets should be required to use it to their advantage. And so, like you said, if they're being targeted, I don't know if I would say they are being targeted, but I do think that the regulations for using that database and using that program should be tightened a little bit.
So to piggyback off of that question, in 1999, whenever this opioid crisis became a crisis, the vets were not invited to any discussion stipulating these. Could that be part of how they were targeted?
By the pharmacies,
Pharmaceutical companies.
I think that may have had something
In any of your research, did you see any suggestions as far as basically rationing these opioids? And because you have other pain medicine options. And so to me, the opioids should be used for those extreme cases rather than just on a general basis. Has anybody, have you seen any sort of suggestion with that?
I did, and however, when I saw that, I think it kind of needs to be, it's kind of being a little bit to the other side right now where it's like being too restricted. So that kind of is what is leading to the back ordering of the drugs. And then also mixing so that also leads to the mixing of non-narcotic drugs in order to have the same effect as an opioid. So I think that yes, that's a good idea. However, I think that it kind of needs, we need to figure out what's the happy medium for that. So how we can make it to where there's not too little, how we can make it to where there's not too many.
You said that there are other methods that we should use besides these opioids. It was one of your suggestions for the end, but that should use other methods. What are these other methods? And if they're so great, why aren't they using them?
Which one?
Maybe one more. First one.
Oh, other methods,
specific.
sorry, this is kind of vague. I meant this in reference to the study here as well as the compassion cultivation training. So this kind of leads back to what Wayman was asking about, how it makes it easier, other methods other than simply writing a prescription and giving it to a patient.
Okay, I gotta stop. That's guys, we're out of time. So chat with her at lunch. Yeah, great too.
Would you like me to change that? Sure.
Technically, in the US, they're called nomad.
I instead of aluminum, I actually video. Okay? And I'm physically unable to spell colors in American way. I have to spell colors in our British way, otherwise I have to spell. So,
Okay, guys, if you can take a seat, please, we're gonna start in about a minute. Okay, our next presentation is the art of persuasion with Amanda Sturman.
Laurence Olivier once said that theater is the art of persuasion. The actor persuades himself first and through himself the audience. This exchange opens a door of vulnerability which solidifies the relationship between audience member and actor. This relationship makes the stage an ideal medium for political expression. Now, in our isolated community, it is difficult to relate to and participate in theater, in political theater especially. However, the American dream is an experience to which every American community can relate. The American dream has been a significant topic in political theater, and its relevance to every community makes the subject an ideal introduction to political theater. Hello, my name is Amanda Sturman, and this is The Art of Persuasion. With playwrights such as Augusto Boal and Bertolt Brecht, people were able to find their political liberation and voice through theater. Augusto Boal was a Brazilian theater practitioner. Boal worked to rehumanize humanity throughout the 50s and 60s by developing the theater of the oppressed. Theater of the oppressed bridges the gap between performer and audience member as participants tackle social topics that lead to an active participation in their society. He believed that seeing a conflict resolved on stage released a catharsis, and this catharsis was then substituted for action. So to avoid this, he wanted the audience to be participants in improvising solutions to social issues. Since his work in Brazil, Boal's work has been used across the world in social and political activism, conflict resolution, community building, therapy, and government legislation, as well as by grassroots organizations. This practice stimulates community involvement in social issues simply by opening up the dialogue. Bertolt Brecht had a similar vision of theater. He believed that artists create active and critical points appropriations of reality. Brecht introduced the influential writing collective to Germany. His work is very similar to Boal's as far as audience participation is concerned. His works became more political and more controversial as he began to incorporate communism into his plays. Now, this was all right before the rise of Nazi Germany. So as you can imagine, his plays were banned in Germany, and he had to move to Prague for several years and then to America in the 40s, and he was still a communist, so he needed to leave America pretty soon as well. He spent the rest of his years in Germany where he wanted to develop the Berkman-Duns effect, or the alienation effect. He did not want an emotionally attached audience at all. He wanted a strictly objective and analytical audience. So he wrote Mother Courage and Her Children. This play followed the story of an old merchant woman who sells her items to the Swiss army to make a living. Unfortunately for Brecht, this play was very successful, and he did not achieve his goal of an analytical audience. Though this particular experiment failed, Brecht's belief that artists can bring about social change still stands. Though Brecht and Boal believed that the only way to create social change was through audience participation, other groups knew the importance of being an observer in theater. The Actors Franchise League was able to change UK legislation by the play in the workhouse. The Coverture Law placed married Victorian women under complete control of their husbands. However, the Actors Franchise League was able to change this law simply by representing this true story of a woman who was forced to work in a workhouse by her husband. From Brazil to the UK, political theater has enabled many to take political action. However, America faces its own unique challenges caused by our obsession with the American dream. To begin the next phase of my research, I wanted to break the American dream down into parts. First, the definition, then our values, how it has changed, what has remained constant, and our factors. So just to get an idea of the American dream in our community, I administered surveys structured around these questions. I gave these surveys to people I know, which may seem biased. However, the people I know are more likely to go see a show at the Sunflower and be affected by theater. In addition to these questions, I also asked those surveyed about their gender and their age. When I got these surveys back, I compiled answers into a spreadsheet to observe the trends. These are just repeats I found in the different subjects. I also paid attention to the anomalies. These were answers that didn't quite fit into one group. So my expectations for the definition of the American dream were the balance between freedom and security. I got this from a novel I read by Tom Scanlon called Family Drama and American Dreams. He theorized that the American dream is primarily finding the balance between freedom and security. I disagreed with this slightly, however, I believed that people in our community might see this way as well. I believe the trends and values would be family and money, because America is extremely work-centric. We have no goal to really enjoy life. We're just about money, money, money all the time. And yeah, I believe that the American dream has changed because we are more materialistic, just based on discussions I've had from older generations, including my grandmother. I believe the factors to be family and media, because we are constantly exposed to media, especially in this day and age. I begin with the definition. In the Ethic of America, James Trezzo Adams defines the American dream as the ability of each man and woman to attain to the full stature of which they are innately capable. Again, I believe the expectation, the trends in the definition of the American dream would be the balance between freedom and security. The trends I received were materialism, success, opportunity, building a better life for children than what was granted to you. The anomalies were having a good job, building a life free of segregation, the absence of tyrants, owning property, and a brainwashing tool. I had expected the values to be family and money. The trends I received were independence, success, and generosity. The anomalies were patriotism, family, sports, strong military, brotherhood, pride, conformity, ignorance, and the elite. We have optimists in our community. How it has changed. The majority of those surveyed believed that the American dream had changed since their grandparents' childhood, though their reasoning did vary. The trends were the difference between emotional and personal success, the ease in which we now live, more focus on money, and more self-interest. The anomalies were loss of Christian values, more care for veterans, and the ideology that more is better. Now, according to Noam Chomsky and a New York Times article, this shift occurred sometime in the 70s and 80s due to a media that is controlled by the wealthy and powerful. The main culprit is advertisements. Ads began to associate the American dream with owning a car and owning a house, and pretty soon Americans were constantly exposed to what their life should be like versus what it actually is, and many companies are still doing this today. The sole value that has remained constant from their parents' childhood is generosity. The anomalies are freedom, success, money, family, the ability to travel and own property, dreaming, and nothing. My final question was, where do our values and perceptions of the American dream come from? The expectations were media and family, and that was the one thing I predicted correctly. The trends were media, family, and society. The anomalies were school, justice systems, books, people in power, historical backgrounds, and our definition of success. Now, all these ideas of the American dream unite playwrights such as Eugene O'Neill, Tennessee Williams, Arthur Miller, and Edward Albee. Eugene O'Neill described his life as born in a hotel room and, god damn it, died in a hotel room. He had a very rough family life, and he demanded independence from the family procreation and primarily focused on the family of orientation in his plays. His plays typically center around domesticity, including Beyond the Horizon, A Wife for Life, Abortion, and A Long Day's Journey into Night. Williams traps the individual within the family, opening a door of family conflict and destruction. He is known for A Streetcar Named Desire, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and The Glass Menagerie. Arthur Miller relates the individual and his family to the society, making his works more universal. He is known for All My Sons, The Price, and The Death of the Salesman. Edward Albee differs from the rest of these gentlemen because he brings family life to the stage to attack it directly. He satirizes the middle-class family as mindless, sterile, and cruel. He's known for The Sandbox, The American Dream, and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. I read a play from each of these playwrights, as well as Fences by August Wilson, and compared their themes with our community's perceptions of the American Dream. I read A Long Day's Journey to Night from O'Neill, The Glass Menagerie from Williams, Death of a Salesman from Miller, and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf from Albee. Again, with A Long Day's Journey into Night. This play is an autobiography of O'Neill's life. It deals primarily with this idea of a nuclear family that is torn apart by drug and alcohol addiction. In this play, family is not a place of stability, but rather a battleground of uncertainty. It deals primarily with money and owning property, as Mary explains that her husband is never worried about anything except money and property and the fear that he'll end his days in poverty. There's also a mention of the straying of Christian values. Tyrone accuses his boys of straying from Catholicism, which has led to their own self-destruction. Next, I read The Glass Menagerie. Williams covers a myriad of problems with the American Dream in this play. He also touches on the anomalies such as the distance of Christian values. Now, Tom, the central character, is motivated by instincts, while his mother, Amanda, claims that Christian adults should strive for superior things. While Tom's aspirations are seen as selfish to Amanda, Williams wants the audience to see how our assumed obligations to the family inhibits the individual's ambitions. Tom and his sister Laura are on two opposite ends of the spectrum. Tom is highly ambitious, while his sister Laura just drifts along. These two extremes show how the balance of sacrifice and freedom necessary to maintain a nuclear family. Fences. Though we could never perform fences in our community due to our demographic, I believe that it's still important. I believe that it's so important to our community. It deals primarily with money and class. As described by Rose early on in the play, that there's a lot of people who don't know they can do no better than they're doing now. That's just something you've got to learn. It also touches on providing more to your children than what was granted to you. Troy forces his son Corey to quit football so he can keep his job at the A&P. However, Rose advocates for her son, saying that he just wants to be like Troy. However, Troy retorts with, I don't want him to be like me, I want him to get as far away from my life as he can get. However, his plans for Corey fail. Later on in the play, Rose tells Corey that he's Troy Maxon all over again. In Troy's attempt to make Corey into everything he wasn't, he accidentally made him into everything that he was. This play shows how outside forces dictate our ability to achieve the American dream. Death of the Salesman also deals with the nuclear family. It shows the conflict between the values of family and of happiness and success as well, which is very interesting. It's demonstrated by Biff. Biff works on a farm and he's very happy. However, he's not making very much money, and he feels like a failure due to these preconceived notions of the American dream that he got from his father. He sees the flaws in his father's definition of success, calling it a measly manner of business. However, he still falls victim to the same system. In Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Albee has a much less subtle approach to pointing out the problems with family life and the elite. He makes an immediate connection to America with the names of his protagonists, George and Martha, which are parallels to George and Martha Washington. Their unstable marriage is fueled by this illusion of their son. So on top of this representation of a horrible, horrible family life, you have this other layer of symbolism where the parallel to the father of our country cannot have a son, and his son is really an illusion just all throughout the script. So that's very cool. The analysis is, so political theater contains multiple aspects of the American dream, mostly centering around family. What I enjoy the most about these works is that they not only show that the American dream isn't achievable for most, but they show how our conflicting values make that so, such as money and happiness, and freedom versus the security that comes with having a family. These plays do lack a change in the American dream as well as the factors, and they are all also highly critical, and they lack the positive aspects to the dream. However, political theater's objective is not to demonstrate all the great things there are in society, it's to tell the stories that people aren't always ready to hear. So just from these 5 plays, there's already a representation of our perceptions of the American dream, including family, money, success, selfishness, and the anomalies of the elite and Christian values. Cortez's isolation can be seen as beneficial, however, when it comes to art and outside opinions, our remoteness is a disadvantage. The exposure of art that demonstrates relevance to us in our community will allow us to step out of our comfort zone just enough to begin questioning our place in society. Though American playwrights conflict with the ideas of Bull or Brecht, they have similar goals to educate the public and empower them to change their own lives. A common argument against political theater is that it's becoming all about liberals. It's progressives preaching to progressives, which isn't progressive at all. However, this is why the American dream is so important to represent. The American dream is an experience to which every party and affiliation can relate to. It's not specific to one party. If I were to do this again, I would survey a lot more people. I feel that if I had surveyed more people, I would have observed more trends. Based on my research and surveys, I believe that the important things to represent are family, media influence, specifically advertising, and materialism. I feel that media influence should especially be talked about more, especially in this generation. Edward Albee once said that if a play is not socially useful, if it doesn't have content that makes people think intelligently, then it is a waste of time. An intro into political theater will allow us to move beyond our isolation and stimulate political thinking without the didactic lecture. Theater is an incredible tool that has been used to remind us of our strengths and our shortcomings. I believe that this art of persuasion can be used to everyone's advantage in political expression and engagement, as well as the development of culture. Thank you. All right, now to the fun part, questions?
So part of what some people say prevents an alienation effect in theater is the lack of that fourth wall. There's nothing between the audience and what's happening there. Kind of a two-part question. One, do you think the internet, with its just multiplicity of everything all at once, creates an element of alienation that Brecht was never able to achieve? So when people look at stuff online, they are disassociated and not as emotionally engaged as ever before?
Yes, I think so, and I think that's actually bad. I don't agree with what Brecht was trying to accomplish, because I think that human connection is really what can stimulate real action in our community.
You anticipated my second question. I was going to
I
ask
see.
if you think places like the internet and YouTube are the appropriate place for us as a society to engage in this thing you're calling political theater.
It is a place. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's as effective as stage or even in film or novels. I think the emotional connection is just lost.
And so, Brecht talks about the synthetic catharsis coming to understanding of and events which are sort of played out on stage. So in our current society, because of things like the internet and YouTube and a large ubiquity of so-called revolutionary groups or anti-government movements or what have you, we now have something called the Burning Man effect, which is the same thing. Did you come across what sociologists are calling the Burning Man effect, meaning that you're getting the same catharsis not from the theater, but from so-called revolutionary groups like Burning Man, for example?
I did not encounter that in my research, no. Yes?
I mean, I'm not a theater person, I'm unsure of what your actual proposal is. More people interested in theater?
No, just the incorporation of political theater into our community. I think the American Dreams would be the appropriate.
What does that look like?
Just like at the Sunflower, just more shows relating to our area. Just getting Cortez more involved.
More participation, because I know they had something like that the other day, because so it's very similar. And then that'll make people more politically involved, is that what you're saying? Or more involved to?
Yes, more willing.
Is satire on television not similar?
Satire television.
Because the United States is one of the leaders in satire displays to try to motivate or otherwise point out discrepancies in our way of living versus all the other countries in the world. that not the same effect, or not what we're going for?
I believe that it is certainly a medium, and I believe it is important. However, I believe in theater there is a certain amount of attention required to really grasp. And in television, I don't think you're fully immersed in the story. I think you just kind of turn it on for background noise mostly. I don't really see much learning going on in watching television. Yes.
So the analysis of the plays that you talked about
Yes.
comes from 2 generations ago, but your survey is bringing together modern time and trends that you see amongst your peers. So how are you connecting those elements? How are you connecting that long ago analysis of these plays concerning the American dream to your current analysis of the changing ideas?
Well, I think that these plays still hold relevance in our community and in this modern era. However, I think that new playwrights do have a task in representing these new ideas, and I think just new factors that we may have. I know that UCLETS does that. I haven't read August Sage County yet, but I will. And I think that there are playwrights out there who are addressing the issues.
Do you think that there is value in plays that are that show a positive spin or an optimistic spin? Do you think that things can be learned, discussions can be opened from plays that are not necessarily about a falling apart family or losing the American dream, but in attaining the American dream or in a more positive view of that?
I did think of that before. I believe that typically messages are lost in comedic theater. However, I think it's still a good tool. I think that representing tragedies with the American dream would be more effective, though, in showing the problems.
I'd like to kind of tie back to the Greek structure of showing, they would within their festival show a number of tragedies, and then they would have some sort of a comedic piece and a satire, a satyr play of sorts to kind of cleanse the palate a little bit. And oftentimes those satyr plays were useful to kind of poking fun at kind of what you were talking about within television. I might argue that having a balance of the two is probably the ideal structure for gaining a full understanding of whatever you're trying to understand.
Okay, so my question is here, how do you see the difference between entertainment and social involvement? Because I have to say, when I go to the theater, I want to go to be entertained. I don't necessarily want to go and be depressed and told that the smart people don't buy into Christian values and whatnot. So where do you see that line?
I believe that's where it comes from, leading with a story. A lot of political theater playwrights lead with a story to get the audience's attention so that they can easily relate to it. I guess it's really up to the audience member whether they want to analyze the story or not. However, the story is there to analyze.
And as an old person, I just want to point out that you clearly did not live in the 80s if you think that we are more materialistic now. I think that today are more interested in self-fulfillment in these degrees that they are interested in that don't really have a lucrative career attached to them. So but O'Neill, to one's property, is highly associated with the socialists in this country. So I find that kind of interesting.
I have a question about technicalities. So you had a lot of trends that you wanted to compare between the older generation or the previous generation of political theater. So now, how did you come up with those trends? What's the origin of those trends, or how did you create them? How did you know what to put on that survey?
Oh, I see. Okay. A lot of those things that came from that survey were just questions I had while I was reading the American Dream by Tom Scanlon's novel. Family drama in American Dreams. He defined the American Dream as the balance between security and freedom. And like I said, I disagreed with that, so I just wanted to know what people in our community might think that. And I was just thinking of the topics that would hold most relevance to the topics that come out in theater.
From him.
From
So
him.
those are elements that he spoke about that used to be part of the American Dream that he was, have shifted and changed. and
Yes.
those-
Yes.
So the American Dream stat changes.
Yes.
In the early 1900s, the whole idea of the American Dream was a democratic republic tolerant of differences. By the end of the 1900s, it was all about the individuals with their differences and their rights, with some added consumerism. In your slide showed Levittown and Budweiser. Where do you think it's going next?
Honestly, I think it's dim just with the amount of technology that we have and the amount of media and news that we are consuming every day, like every moment of every day. We don't really have a break from all this bad news. So I think that it's going downhill, honestly, which is sad, but I think that there are a few things that can help negate that, such as theater and the things that we can in fact control.
As the ideal that we hold out there, what do you think the next ideal might be that political theater presents to us if everything else we're currently looking at here, we're just kind of going downhill?
I think a lot more self-obsession, and I think that more technology will play into theater as well.
What do you think in some of the larger cities that I've lived in and visited, you see a lot of street theater. How do you see street theater fitting into this process?
Oh, street theater in Cortez. That's a weird thing to even imagine. I think maybe potentially we could build our way up to that. I think we do need more of an introduction to political theater to just kind of get to that point. I think eventually we could see street theater if we get enough interest in that. Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna stop it, guys. Good job.
Good show.
Don't do it. Yours is really good, Amanda. I didn't know your references, so I don't read books, but it was good. I'm looking at you.
What I'm talking about.
This is like.
As you can see.
That's how your arm is.
No, they're like, yeah, no, I get
We're mostly sugar. Expecting a crash.
But it's great to be at least
I can't.
next, maybe look better. What is she? What is she? Like I kind of do, but I feel like this is like yeah, they out that good energy. I don't know, but then it's like Gloria.
I'm still gonna take one of the band classes.
Let's go for the schedule.
Oh, I actually yeah, I don't know why.
I hear
How are you?
In some way, I'm less stressed. Yeah. Like in some ways. See, in some ways.
Like, I don't know, I feel like it's so easy. I took your ants for, mine's not gonna be that long, just like creative questions. And I got people watching it. I just gonna show up there. No, I think what it was is that like he brought people it's like we had to play like 6 to get to the right I'm thinking what number, and then it's like yeah, ending's gonna be weird, and I'm just gonna try to like questions. Help yourself to these. Yeah, positive. They're probably gonna ask me some question. I'd be like, well, based on my, be like, well, you know, based off of my past knowledge. I want pendant, but see, like, I should stop too. And I always like it's right there.
I think there's but like there's just more emotional connection, and there's more.
I thought there was lots of
I have to say
That was great.
Like, I guess, you guys hear the voice on those.
I just forgot. And I know it's amazing. I put it in the sheet, but I'm
Outside, is she sitting with her? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That was weird.
I didn't realize that was here.
Well, that's there's like students, like there's like so much. Why? Yeah, I know, and like stuff like that. No, I don't see it's one of us. No, yeah, that's what I know. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Holy shit, yeah.
We didn't listen to anything you said all we heard. All we felt was
Sorry, guys. Sorry. Love you all, but I don't.
She asked me a I wasn't here dozen times, I think. Just have
way my up.
I wasn't, we weren't even.
You smell very, very strong. Right at No, we'll only be here a half hour.
Once again, I just want to remind you, if you have a cell phone, silence it, and please don't bring it out during the course of the presentation. Also, as far as questions are concerned, she will answer the questions of the panel first. If there's still time, then you're more than welcome to ask questions yourself. The third thing is that we are live streaming, so please mind your P's and Q's verbally. Thank you very much. We will now have Krista Hager doing Coming Home to the Tribe.
In the late 19th century, there was a strange phenomena of white Americans leaving Western civilization to join native tribes. Similarly, white captives who had been assimilated into the tribes would often hide from their liberators or simply refuse to, or run away from their liberators once rescued, or simply refuse to readapt into modern society. The opposite never happened. Never did a Native American willingly leave his or her tribe to join Western civilization. Modern society has its luxuries, and life is easier with the introduction of industrialization, but it's missing something important: a community and a shared experience. Countries like Israel, Denmark, Norway, and Switzerland have found a solution to this missing piece. Through compulsory military service, people feel a part of something bigger, and they feel connected to those around them. Israel requires all Jews and Druze over the age of 18 to serve 24 to 31 months, which means that 75% of the population has conscripted. In Denmark, 4,000 18-year-old men conscript for 12 months. In Norway, 8,000 18-year-old men and women conscript for 19 months. And in Switzerland, every 18-year-old man conscripts. However, conscientious objectors may opt to do civil service. These countries have lower suicide and PTSD rates than the United States and better social cohesion. Compulsory military service creates a united community founded on a shared experience, and that creates a better quality of life for individuals. I created a survey that would measure community involvement in alienation, with alienation being the experience of being isolated from a group from which one should belong. I had 2 associates of mine with a variety of friends with various backgrounds shared over social media. I had 97 veterans respond and 50 non-veterans respond. I used my non-veterans as my control because they had not gone through the service that I am studying. I broke down my data by demographic and examined trends both by demographic and for all Americans. 66% of my participants were veterans, but only 7% of US adults are veterans. Veterans tend to feel more alienated than non-veterans, so that could have affected things there. I found that Americans are involved in their communities. As can be seen by the top graph, 60.5% of Americans are involved in community events, frequently or some, As can be seen by the bottom graph, 72.8% are involved in community service, frequently or some. 75.5% felt they had a duty to serve their community. No one said that they did not feel they have a duty to serve. Overall, Americans feel they have a duty to serve those around them. Americans also feel alienated. 51.3% felt connected to their community, and 30% felt completely alienated. Broken down by demographic, 38% of veterans said they felt alienated, and 13% of non-veterans said they felt alienated. However, I did find that veterans are more active in their communities. 64% of veterans are involved in community events frequently or some, while 54% of non-veterans are active in community events frequently or some. I also found that veterans are more connected with other veterans. 96% are involved in a veteran-run organization, such as the Combat Veteran Motorcycle Association. 91% said they felt a shared experience with those they served closely with, such as in their unit or platoon, and 95% said they felt a connection with other veterans. This compares to non-vets, where only 44% said they felt a community connection, and 52% said they had a similar lifestyle to most Americans. This shows that military service creates a strong community that unites people. Community involvement lessens feelings of alienation. Of veterans who did not feel alienated, 71% were involved in a veteran-run organization, and 98% were involved in community events frequently or some, and 100% were involved in community service. According to the self-determination theory, people need three things to be content. They need to feel competent at what they do, authentic in their lives, and connected to those around them. These are known as intrinsic needs, as opposed to extrinsic needs such as value, money, and status. Modern society values the extrinsic needs over the intrinsic needs because we focus so heavily on materialism. This leads to alienating behaviors that start at birth. In America, 95% of children sleep alone in order to teach them to be self-soothing, while in hunter-gatherer tribes, babies were held up to 90% of the time. This has negative effects later in life, such as feelings of alienation. Rich countries suffer from depression up to 8 times that of poor countries, and women in rural, poorer areas are less likely to suffer from depression than their urban counterparts. The more affluent a person or society is, the more likely they are to suffer from depression and have higher suicide rates. The need to feel connected is most ignored in modern society. According to the Pew Research Center, 1 out of 10 Americans feel alienated, and my own research found that 55% of people who felt alienated said they had no similar lifestyle to other Americans. However, the military service can fulfill this need to feel connected. From day one in basic training, you are never alone. You sleep in barracks so close you can reach out and touch the person on either side of you. A battle buddy system is implemented so you never go anywhere alone. Group praise and punishment is implemented to break people down and build them up as a group. You no longer focus on the I, instead focus on the group. This sense of connection improves mental health. The United States generally has higher PTSD and suicide rates than these other countries. As can be seen by the graph, the United States' suicide rate is over double that of Israel's and is higher than Norway and Denmark's. Every data set has an outlier, and I don't understand why Switzerland's suicide rate is higher than ours. It's just my outlier in this data set. Similarly, in the United States, 20% of people who experience a traumatic event go on to develop PTSD, and 20% of Iraq and Afghanistan war veterans have PTSD. Denmark had a long-term PTSD rate of 9.2%, and most remarkable, Israel has a PTSD rate as low as 1%, despite intermittent war. People feel more comfortable sharing their problems and are more understanding because those around them have experienced similar things to them. This can be seen already with veteran-run organizations such as the Combat Veteran Motorcycle Association. This fall, I got to meet with 5 members of this organization. My friend is a member, and he wanted me to meet with people who could give me advice as I start my own journey into the Army. As we sat around my friend's bonfire, they were drinking and telling stories, as vets often do. Some of their stories were lighthearted, like when one man's entire unit shaved their head, got sunburned, and then got Article 15s. Some of them were not so lighthearted, as when one man broke his back jumping out of an airplane. But they all said that CDMA gave them the support and camaraderie that they had in the military that they now lack in the United States and the civilian world. They have a network of support and they can reach out to a number of people whenever they need it. Many of them have PTSD and mental illnesses, but they're not alone. 71% of veterans who did not feel alienated were members of veteran-run organizations. The military teaches people that when they leave, they will need to reach out to people, which society doesn't teach us. Most people in the military are middle-class males, and as previously established, the more affluent a person is, the more likely they are to suffer from depression. These people have been removed from their alienating societies and inserted into an entity that teaches them, that makes them feel united to those around them. This improved mental health stems from better social cohesion, which can be seen through assault and homicide rates. Countries with compulsory military service tend to have lower violent crime rates. As can be seen by the bar graph, the United States' homicide rate is almost 4 times that of Israel's. Norway has the lowest with 0.5 homicides per 100,000 people. Switzerland has the lowest. The US also has one of the highest assault rates. It's almost 5 times that of Norway's. Switzerland has the lowest with 7.4 assaults per 100,000 people. Israel's assault rate is so high because of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that has been going on since the 18th century. Compulsory military service can fix a lot of things, but it cannot fix everything, especially centuries of bloodshed that continues en masse today. When people feel connected to those around them, they are less likely to harm them because they feel a familial-like connection to them. This better social cohesion has been seen in the United States with the Ohio State attack. In 2016, a man ran his vehicle into one of the halls at Ohio State University and then began stabbing people. In a separate hall, 10 military members secured the building that they were in. They secured the perimeter and kept an eye on doorways and stairwells. One said that we were ready to defend our classmates if we had to. People in the military are trained to care for those around them and make sure that everyone gets out alive. Their military service instilled a duty to their community to them, that they felt the need to defend their fellow students. Compulsory military service will not only help the U.S., but also has global benefits. The U.S. military performs these exercises called MedReadies, or medical readiness exercises. They are performed by combat medical units to test deployment readiness. They are performed in less developed countries that are supported by the United States, such as Honduras, Bolivia, and Guatemala. They only take a few days, but people are stationed here for up to 6 months. Medical, dental, vision, and veterinary service are provided for locals. Medics, nurses, and physicians give antibiotics and perform minor procedures, and veterinarians help people care for livestock. The U.S. military also builds needed infrastructure for essential needs like education and access to clean water in these areas. Military officials work with local governments to identify areas of need. Once deployed to combat zones, these people continue to help people. Medics will take extra supplies on their missions, vaccinations clinics are held, and clinics and schools are built. Compulsory military service will create a united community founded on a shared experience. As with countries like Israel, Denmark, Norway, and Switzerland, and with our military members, there will be more support and better social cohesion for people. In the United States, compulsory military service should be required of every 18-year-old. He or she should be required to complete 18 months of their training, 18 months including their training. Like in Switzerland, the military will also do civil acts such as plowing roads. The United States is broken and divided, and although compulsory military service cannot solve all of the problems faced by our country, it can begin the healing process by building a community founded on a shared experience.
Okay, so when you didn't show the slides, but when you have the slide up there, you talked about how veterans feel more alienated than the other citizens. Why is that if they have that military connection? Why do they feel more alienated?
Because they've gone through a rigorous training that changes their mindset. They may feel connected to other veterans, but that's only 7% of US adults, so they still feel connected from the rest of the United States.
So I got one that is associated with that question. Your numbers, you talked about how it's only 8.2% of Americans that don't participate in some sort of a community service or community event or whatever. That's, but 1 out of 10 Americans still feels alienated. So if participating in community events forces our alienation to ease, then why is it that 1 out of 10 Americans still feels alienated even though we're all doing that already?
Because we still have a shared experience.
Except community service, which all but 8.2% are doing.
You know, you talk about those experiences in the barracks where everybody's all together all the time. As an introvert, that would cause me high anxiety. So forcing me to be in that situation would not better my mental state or my sense of alienation. Is there any way that you think that this could also happen for those people who cannot handle that kind of a situation?
I think forcing them to handle it and forcing them into these tight-knit communities would help them.
I can tell you.
I got another question for you. These countries that have mandatory service, why do you think they have mandatory service? What's going on in these countries that stipulates that type of behavior sociologically?
The emphasis on community and connection and the shared experience.
Did you find that research whenever you were looking into the origin of those mandatory services?
No.
Also, those countries like Denmark, Norway, Israel are also very homogeneous in terms of, like Israel is 90% Muslim, you know what I mean? In each one of those countries.
No.
They're not Israel. Yeah, no, but there's 90% homogeneity in one way or another in all three of those countries, which makes them a little easier because everybody is very familiar. And then doing that in a country that's not as homogeneous in terms of either race, religion, or any of that, it's very mixed and very spread, and you can have a lot less success because you're applying it to a different environment.
I don't think so, because the military, they say in the military that you're not white, you're not black, you're not Hispanic, you're just green. So the differences won't be emphasized in the military, such as it would more homogenize the United States, give us a connecting factor no matter our background.
Could the U.S. handle financially doing that? That's a lot of people to suddenly influx into the Army and house and feed and train.
I think so. We already have a very large security budget, and I think it would work out.
So the idea of having a military is to be ready or on a defensive footing to deal with some sort of threat or challenge to your society. And many people say something that really adds to the social cohesion in Israel in particular is the fact that they are surrounded by and perceive threats all the time, and this encourages that dedication to the group. Do you think it's healthy for a society to structure itself around the fear of threat so heavily?
No.
So might it be better to have like compulsory civil service as opposed to military service, to where like with the Medrets, where they're going out providing health care in like Guatemala, Is there any data that shows those military personnel have less teamwork thinking after that than those who are in a combat zone? Or could dedication to serving a society work just as well as dedication to serving a military need?
Well, the people who do the med readies go to combat zones if they're,
So there's a bleeding of that.
yeah, they are combat medics, so.
Those Doctors Without Borders maybe have an incredible esprit de corps or spirit of the team cohesion after their experiences.
I did not look into that. However, I think that veterans would have I'm sure that they do still have cohesion, but Doctors Without Borders would still have cohesion, but I feel like it would not be as great as it would be in the military, because everybody goes through the same training, whereas not every American can go through Doctors Without Borders. However, if you have someone going to Doctors Without Borders and someone going to Team Rubicon, yeah, they're similar, but the experience aren't going to be as same as they would in the military.
How do you think it would affect their diplomatic ties with, say, Russia, China, North Korea? All of a sudden, we announce that we're going to train 10 million more people how to fight.
I know Russia has compulsory military service, and I'm not sure if North Korea does, but as it's something that is commonly practiced, I think that they would see it as a threat.
I wouldn't see it as a threat if we quadrupled our military abilities. I guess what I'm getting at is, would it fuel the arms race anymore?
I don't think so.
Aren't most cases of PTSD from the military? And so doesn't that expose more of our people to situations in which their mental health is compromised?
Yes, but as had been seen, Israel had a PTSD rate of 1%. So if you come, in the US, you go join the army, you have this cohesive community in the military, you come back and it's suddenly gone. In Israel, you go join the military, you have this cohesive community, and you come back and it's still there. So although, yes, more people are being exposed to combat situations, when they come back, they still have this community around them that's supporting them.
But don't you think that the people in Israel are expecting to get shot at or have missiles into their community, whereas we pretty much do not think that that's ever going to happen in our lives? And so don't you think that's kind of part of that our military is being thrown into things that they're not really prepared to deal with mentally? Whereas Israel, you're going to meet that whether you stay home or not.
Well, when you join the military, there's this expectation that you will have to put your life on the line. So if you're forced to go in the military, that expectation isn't going to go away, and the training prepares you for such situations.
Going back to the financial thing again, sorry, I'm kind of stuck on that. So what happens to all these, like, 10,000 people are forced to go into the Army now? What does that do to all the universities and colleges now? Is that going to bankrupt them because they're not having this influx of students coming in? And then also, what is that going to do to our the US's, because you're not having these college students coming out and going into the workforce, or even if you're not, if you're vocational, you're still not going into the workforce. What is that going to do to the whole US economy?
They're still going to have this influx of college students. It's just going to be 18 months later than it would if they're going straight out of high school. So it's just delayed, it's still there.
So you mentioned 3 countries, and I just looked it up. There's 26 countries with mandatory service. So are those results across all 26, or is it just occurring in all states?
I picked 4 Democratic countries.
So of the countries on that 26, only 4 were Democratic?
No, more were Democratic. Those were just the 4 that I looked
How
at.
many more?
I don't remember.
Not very many.
Do you think that all people in the United States would be capable of making it through basic training physically?
No, but Norway does this, they call it a call-up, and they call I think it's slightly more than the 4,000, just so they can weed out the 4,000, the 8,000 that will go in. And so they'll look at your physical health, and obviously if you have some sort of disability in your leg, they're not gonna let you go through.
So what does that do to the alienation of those people who are not physically capable of not only are they not connecting with the group, but now they're being told that they can't because they're not physically well enough.
I don't know.
Is there like any concern about the competition that this would form throughout the entire United States with this militaristic government, and how people would compete to try to get into the army if that was the social norm?
In the military, there isn't really a competition when you first get in because you're all broken down at the same level. So there really isn't a competition.
There is a.
Vice Maker.
Do you think that, not to pick on Noah, she's still in here, but don't you think that you would get the same sort of camaraderie I know that I did in being forced to participate in team sports?
No.
Okay, I'm gonna stop that. All right, we're gonna break for lunch. Those of you who are the Honors Diploma students, we do have lunch for you that will be coming in. And so I would ask that you hang around for lunch.